Linda Harper looked at the wheelchair on her grass and got very angry. This disabled girl thought she could play in her perfect park? Linda's voice was loud and mean. If you want to play here, get out of that chair and crawl on the ground like a dog. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Daniel Morrison stood at his kitchen window, watching his 12-year-old daughter Ava practice basketball in their backyard. She sat in her wheelchair, throwing the ball toward the hoop he had put up at full height. Most people said he should lower it for her, but Ava insisted on playing like everyone else. "Dad, watch this shot," Ava called out. Her arms shook a little from cerebral palsy, but her aim was perfect. The ball went straight through the net. "Amazing, sweetheart," Daniel cheered. He felt so proud watching his daughter never give up no matter how hard things got. Ava had been born with cerebral palsy. Her legs didn't work like other kids, so she used a wheelchair to get around. But she never let that stop her from doing what she loved. She played wheelchair basketball, painted beautiful pictures, and made friends easily with her bright smile. Daniel worked as a child protection officer for the county. His job was investigating cases where children were being hurt or neglected. He had seen terrible things happen to kids, which made him even more protective of Ava. After his wife Sarah died from cancer 5 years ago, Ava was his whole world. They lived in Willow Creek Estates, a fancy neighborhood with perfect lawns and expensive houses. Daniel had moved there after Sarah's death, thinking it would be the best place to raise Ava. The schools were good, it was safe, and the community had nice parks and activities. What Daniel didn't know was that the neighborhood had a problem. Her name was Linda Harper. Linda Harper lived 3 houses down in the biggest house on the street. She was the president of the Home Owners Association, which meant she made rules for everyone in the neighborhood. Linda had been in charge for 7 years and she ruled like a queen. She fined people for tiny violations, complained about anything that didn't look perfect, and especially hated anyone who was different. "Can we go to the park today, Dad?" Ava asked, rolling her wheelchair closer to him. "I want to try the new swings they put in." Daniel smiled. The new swings were special ones that kids in wheelchairs could use. Daniel had fought hard to get them installed, going to HOA meetings and arguing with Linda Harper for months. Finally, the board had agreed to spend the money. "Of course we can go," Daniel said. "Let me get my jacket." The community park was beautiful, with green grass, playground equipment, and a small pond. On Saturday morning, it was full of families enjoying the sunshine. Children ran around while parents sat on benches drinking coffee. Ava spotted her best friend Mia right away. Mia was climbing on the monkey bars, her blonde hair in pigtails. "Can I go say hi?" Ava asked. "Go ahead," Daniel said. He sat on a nearby bench where he could watch her but still give her independence. Daniel pulled out his phone to check work emails. 3 new cases had come in this week: a neglect situation with twin babies, a domestic violence case where kids had witnessed the abuse, and suspected abuse at a local daycare. Each case meant children who needed someone to fight for them. "Ava! Ava!" Mia called out excitedly, climbing down to hug her friend. "Mom said you scored 15 points in your last game. That's so cool." "It was just practice," Ava said modestly, but she was clearly proud. "Coach Martinez says if I keep getting better, I might make the regional team." Daniel watched the 2 girls chat happily. Mia's mother Sarah Thompson was a nurse who worked at the hospital. She was one of the few neighbors who had been truly welcoming when they moved to Willow Creek. She often helped with Ava when Daniel's work got busy. The peaceful morning was suddenly interrupted by the sharp sound of heels clicking on the sidewalk. Daniel looked up to see Linda Harper walking toward them with her usual angry expression. Linda was a tall woman with blonde hair pulled back tight. She wore expensive clothes and always looked like she smelled something bad. She carried herself like she owned the entire neighborhood, which in many ways she did. "Excuse me," Linda called out in a loud voice. "You need to move that wheelchair off the grass right now." Daniel's stomach dropped. Ava had rolled her chair onto the edge of the lawn to get closer to the swing set. Her wheels were barely touching the grass. "I'm sorry?" Daniel stood up, immediately going into protective mode. Linda marched closer, her designer purse clutched in her manicured hands. "That wheelchair is damaging the grass. HOA rules clearly state that no motorized vehicles are allowed on the common areas." "It's not a motorized vehicle," Daniel said carefully, trying to stay calm. "It's a wheelchair. And Ava has every right to use the park." "Not if she's destroying property," Linda snapped. Her voice was getting louder and other families were starting to look over. "Do you see those tire marks? That grass cost the association $3,000 to replant last spring. I won't have it ruined by equipment that doesn't belong here." Ava had gone quiet, her face turning red with embarrassment. Other kids and parents were staring now. Mia moved closer to her friend, confused by what was happening. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires equal access to public facilities, Daniel said, using the authority in his voice that he used at work. This park is part of the common areas that all residents can use equally. Linda laughed coldly. Don't lecture me about rules, Mr. Morrison. I've been managing this community for 7 years. I know exactly what is and isn't allowed. If you want special treatment, you should have asked permission first. We did ask, Daniel replied, his jaw getting tight. The accessible swings were installed because families like ours asked for inclusion. Ava has as much right to be here as any other child. Rights come with responsibilities, Linda shot back. And everyone has to follow the same standards. No exceptions. More people were watching now. Some looked sympathetic, others just seemed uncomfortable witnessing the argument. A few were recording with their phones, though Daniel couldn't tell if they were supporting him or Linda. Linda, please, Daniel tried a different approach. She's just a 12-year-old girl who wants to play. Surely we can work something out. But his reasonable tone seemed to make Linda even angrier. Her eyes narrowed, and when she spoke, her voice was full of poison. Work something out, she repeated mockingly. You want the entire community to lower our standards for one child's convenience? Maybe if she tried harder to fit in instead of expecting special treatment everywhere she goes. The words hit Ava like a slap. Daniel saw his daughter's face crumple, tears starting to form in her eyes as she gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Don't speak to my daughter that way, Daniel warned, stepping between Linda and Ava. But Linda wasn't finished. She walked around him and spoke directly to Ava with a cruelty that shocked everyone watching. You know what, sweetheart? Linda's voice was fake sweet and nasty. If you really want to play in this park so badly, why don't you get out of that chair and show us you deserve to be here? Crawl over to those swings. Prove you're not just looking for attention. The silence that followed was complete. Even the children on the playground had stopped playing, sensing something terrible was happening. Mia's face went pale and she reached out to hold Ava's hand. I can't walk, Mrs. Harper, Ava whispered, her voice barely audible. You know that. Then maybe you should find somewhere more appropriate to spend your time, Linda replied coldly. This park is for normal children who can use it properly. The word, normal, hit Daniel like a physical blow. He watched Ava flinch as if she'd been slapped, her shoulders sagging with defeat. Around them, people gasped and whispered, but no one stepped in to help. They all lived under Linda's authority and were afraid of her power. But Daniel wasn't afraid. As a child protection officer, he had faced down dangerous criminals and corrupt officials. He had seen what cruelty could do to children, and he had dedicated his life to fighting it. What Linda had just done was emotional abuse, and he wouldn't let it stand. You've crossed a line, Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet. What you just said to my daughter is harassment and emotional abuse of a minor. As a mandated reporter, I'm legally required to document this incident. Linda's confidence wavered for just a moment before coming back. You're overreacting. I was simply enforcing community standards. You told a disabled child to crawl to prove she deserved access to public facilities, Daniel replied, taking out his phone. That's not enforcement. That's cruelty. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Linda's face turned red, but before she could respond, Ava's small voice cut through the tension. Dad, I want to go home. Daniel's heart broke at the defeat in his daughter's voice. The confident, happy girl who had been shooting baskets that morning was now a broken child who just wanted to escape. Okay, sweetheart. We're leaving. As they prepared to go, Linda made one final, devastating attack. She raised her voice so everyone in the park could hear. This is exactly the problem. People who don't belong here moving in and expecting us to change everything for them. If you can't follow the rules like everyone else, maybe you should find a community that caters to your special needs. The cruelty was breathtaking. Daniel felt Ava shake under his touch, and when he looked at her face, he saw something that terrified him. The look of a child who was starting to believe she truly was different, unwanted, less than others. In that moment, Daniel Morrison made a promise that would change everything. Linda Harper had declared war on his family, and he would not let her win. His revenge wouldn't come through violence or public fights. It would come through the system he knew better than anyone, the legal framework designed to protect children from people exactly like her. As they left the park, with Ava silent in her chair and other families watching with sympathy and relief that they weren't the targets, Daniel began planning. He had resources, knowledge, and most importantly, he had right on his side. Linda Harper had made the mistake of abusing the wrong child, and she was about to learn what happened when someone with his training decided to fight back. That evening, Daniel sat in his home office while Ava slept. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind. He had tucked his daughter into bed hours ago, but her usual excitement was gone, replaced by a heartbreaking quietness. "Daddy," she had whispered as he kissed her goodnight, "am I really different from other kids?" The question nearly destroyed him. "You're special, sweetheart, but different doesn't mean less than anyone else. You're brave, kind, and talented. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But he could see Linda's poison working, planting seeds of doubt that could grow into self-hatred if he didn't stop it. Daniel opened his laptop and began typing an incident report. Every detail mattered: Linda's initial confrontation, her escalating aggression, and most importantly, her direct verbal abuse of Ava. He documented everything according to the protocols he used at work. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Thompson. "Daniel, I can't stop thinking about what happened today. Mia is upset about how that woman treated Ava. Is there anything I can do to help?" Daniel typed back, "Thank you for asking. I'm handling it through proper channels. Please give Mia a hug from Ava." But as he returned to his report, Daniel realized he needed more than just documentation. He needed to understand his enemy. Linda Harper had used her power with practiced cruelty, suggesting this wasn't the first time. Daniel opened a new browser window and began researching. The Willow Creek HOA website showed photos of perfect lawns and happy families. Linda's bio described her as a dedicated community leader committed to maintaining excellence. He found the HOA meeting minutes, public records that most people never bothered to read. What he discovered painted a disturbing picture. Over the past 3 years, Linda had issued 47 violation notices, unusually high for their community size. But the pattern of targets revealed her true nature. She had cited elderly residents for medical equipment visible from the street. Families with children were fined for playground noise. Immigrants received landscaping violations that seemed designed to harass rather than help. One case particularly caught Daniel's attention. The Garcia family had a son with autism named Miguel. Linda had fined them repeatedly for disruptive behavior when their child had meltdowns. The family eventually moved away after Linda proposed requiring behavioral bonds for families with special needs children. Daniel made notes, cross-referencing addresses with public records. A clear picture emerged of Linda Harper as a systematic bully who used her position to drive out anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of acceptable. His research was interrupted by a knock at the door. Daniel looked at the clock. 9:30 p.m., late for a casual visit. He found Greg Harper on his doorstep. Linda's husband was tall and soft-spoken, with the careful manner of someone used to cleaning up messes. "Daniel, I hope I'm not bothering you," Greg said politely. "I wanted to talk about what happened today." "What about it?" Daniel kept his voice neutral. "Linda feels there may have been some misunderstanding. She's passionate about community standards, sometimes too much. She asked me to apologize if she seemed harsh." The carefully worded non-apology confirmed Daniel's suspicions. Greg was here to assess the threat and see if Daniel could be bought off with empty gestures. "She told my disabled daughter to crawl to prove she deserved to use public facilities," Daniel said flatly. "That's not passion. That's cruelty." Greg's composure cracked slightly. "I understand you're upset. Perhaps we could discuss some kind of arrangement. The arrangement is following federal law," Daniel interrupted. "Your wife violated my daughter's civil rights in front of witnesses. No discussion changes that." Greg leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I know what you do for work, Daniel. You understand how these situations can escalate. Linda has connections throughout the county: judges, city council members, business leaders. A public fight wouldn't help anyone, especially Ava. Why don't we find a quiet solution?" The threat was subtle but clear. "Back down quietly, or face the full weight of Linda's political connections." "I appreciate you coming by," Daniel said, opening the door wider. "But there's nothing to discuss. Your wife emotionally abused my child in public. I'm going to pursue every legal option to make sure it never happens again." Greg's mask slipped, revealing cold calculation underneath. "That would be unfortunate. For everyone involved." After he left, Daniel returned to his office with renewed determination. The Harpers had confirmed they saw this as a war, and they had made the mistake of threatening him directly. Daniel had dealt with far more dangerous people than a suburban power couple. Monday morning brought new purpose to Daniel's routine. After dropping Ava at school, noting how quiet she had become during the drive, He headed to his office with a carefully prepared plan. The County Child Protection Services building housed dedicated professionals who fought daily battles against child abuse and neglect. Daniel's office was on the third floor, decorated with Ava's artwork and photos from their adventures together. His supervisor, Maria Santos, was a 20-year veteran who had taught Daniel that effective child protection required both passion and strategy. "You look terrible, Morrison," Maria observed as Daniel entered her office with a thick folder. "Please tell me this isn't about overtime." "I need to open a formal investigation," Daniel said, setting the folder on her desk. "Emotional abuse of a minor, possibly part of a pattern of harassment." Maria's expression shifted to professional alertness. She opened the folder and began reading, her eyebrows rising as she absorbed the details. "This happened to Ava?" she asked after finishing the report. "Saturday morning. Multiple witnesses." Daniel's voice stayed steady, but Maria could hear the controlled fury underneath. "The perpetrator is Linda Harper, president of my HOA. I believe this wasn't isolated." Maria leaned back, studying Daniel's face. She had seen him handle disturbing cases with professional distance, but this was personal in a way that concerned her. "Can you be objective about this investigation?" "I documented everything according to protocol," Daniel replied. "I haven't contacted the perpetrator or taken any unofficial action." "But Maria, what she did to Ava is exactly the systematic emotional abuse we see in institutions. If she's done this to other children, we need to stop her." Maria continued reading the meticulous documentation and supporting evidence Daniel had gathered. Witness statements, HOA violation records, social media posts showing discriminatory behavior. "This is solid work," she admitted. "But you realize this will become public record? Your neighbors, local media, everyone will know you're using your position against someone who targeted your daughter." "Good," Daniel said without hesitation. "Let them know that abusing disabled children has consequences. Let every Linda Harper in the county understand we don't tolerate this behavior." Maria studied him for another moment, then signed the authorization form. "Approved. But Daniel, I'm assigning Jake Rodriguez as co-investigator. You'll report to him. And if I feel you're compromising the investigation's integrity, I'm pulling you off." Daniel nodded, understanding the necessity. Jake Rodriguez was a solid investigator with excellent instincts and no personal connection to the situation. An hour later, Daniel sat in the conference room with Jake, spreading evidence across the table. The younger investigator whistled softly as he reviewed the materials. "Jesus, Daniel. This woman really told Ava to crawl? What kind of person does that?" "The kind who's been getting away with abuse for years," Daniel replied. "Look at these HOA violation patterns. She's systematically targeting vulnerable residents, elderly, disabled, immigrants, single parents." Jake studied the incident report and timeline. "You were smart to document everything immediately. But we'll need corroborating testimony to make this stick. I've identified 12 potential witnesses from Saturday, plus at least 6 families harassed by Harper over 3 years. The problem is fear. She holds too much power for people to speak out easily." "Then we make it easy," Jake said grimly. "We show them they're not alone, that there are consequences. Start with Saturday witnesses. Formal interviews on record." Their first interview was scheduled for that afternoon with Sarah Thompson. Sarah worked nights at the hospital, so she was available during business hours when other witnesses were at work. Sarah arrived looking nervous but determined. Daniel introduced Jake as lead investigator and stepped back to let his colleague conduct the interview. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming," Jake began reassuringly. "We're investigating an incident at Willow Creek Community Park this past Saturday. We understand you witnessed what happened." Sarah nodded, glancing at Daniel before focusing on Jake. "I saw everything. It was horrible, the way that woman spoke to Ava. Mia came home crying, asking why some adults are mean to children who can't help being different." Jake activated a recorder and took Sarah through the events step by step. Her account matched Daniel's report perfectly, but revealed additional context he hadn't observed. Before confronting Ava, Mrs. Harper was complaining to another parent about "those people" who expected special treatment, Sarah testified. She specifically mentioned how the wheelchair swings were a waste of money that could have gone to normal equipment. "Did you record any of the incident?" Jake asked. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I started recording when she began yelling at Ava. It was just instinct. My phone was already out taking pictures of Mia. The video was devastating." Linda's voice was crystal clear as she told Ava to crawl, dripping with contempt. The camera captured Ava's face as the words hit her, showing a child's self-worth crumbling in real time. It also showed other families' reactions: shock, dismay, and uncomfortable silence from witnesses afraid to intervene. "This is excellent evidence," Jake said. "Would you testify if this proceeds to formal charges?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied firmly. "What she did was wrong. Ava deserves better. They all do." After Sarah left, Daniel and Jake reviewed the recording multiple times. The audio was clear enough to eliminate any doubt about what Linda had said. Combined with witness testimony and Daniel's documentation, they had a solid foundation. "We need to move fast," Jake said. "Word will spread that we're investigating. Harper will start preparing defenses, maybe try intimidating witnesses." "Already on it," Daniel replied, checking his phone. "I have interviews scheduled with 3 more Saturday witnesses this week. Plus I'm meeting the Garcia family. They moved away after Harper harassed their autistic son. They might testify now that they're out of her reach." Jake nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. Establishing a pattern strengthens our case significantly. Any other HOA members willing to go on record?" "Working on it. There's definitely dissatisfaction with her leadership, but people are scared of retaliation. We need to show them she's not untouchable." Wednesday brought their interview with Elena Garcia, who had driven back from her new home specifically to testify. Elena spoke with the quiet strength of a mother who had fought countless battles for her child's right to exist in unwelcoming spaces. "Mrs. Harper made our lives impossible," Elena testified steadily despite the pain in her eyes. "Miguel has sensory issues from his autism. Sometimes loud noises or changes trigger meltdowns. We worked with therapists, had behavior plans, did everything to help him cope. But she acted like he was doing it on purpose. The harassment had been systematic. Noise complaints for backyard meltdowns. Violation notices for therapy equipment visible through windows. A proposal requiring behavioral bonds for special needs families, essentially financial penalties for having a disabled child. The final straw was when she called Child Protective Services on us," Elena continued, her composure cracking. "She claimed we were neglecting Miguel because we couldn't control his behavior. A caseworker showed up questioning whether we were fit parents. It was humiliating and terrifying." Daniel felt his blood pressure rising. Linda had weaponized his own department against innocent parents, using false reports as harassment tools. It crossed every professional and ethical line imaginable. "The investigator cleared us quickly," Elena concluded. "But the damage was done. Miguel started asking why neighbors hated him. He was 6, asking why he was bad. We couldn't stay where our child was treated like a problem to solve." Jake documented everything thoroughly, including copies of the frivolous CPS report Linda had filed. False reporting constituted a felony in their state, carrying potential jail time and significant fines. Combined with the harassment pattern, it painted systematic abuse going far beyond the single incident with Ava. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Brewster's Coffee tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone. G. Harper." Daniel screenshot the message and forwarded it to Jake with a note. "Opposition trying to make contact. Documenting for file." Jake responded immediately, "Don't go alone. I'll be nearby recording everything. Let's see what they're willing to put on record." Thursday morning found Daniel arriving at Brewster's Coffee 5 minutes early. He chose a window table where Jake could observe from across the street. The busy coffee shop provided perfect surveillance cover while ensuring their conversation occurred publicly with witnesses. Greg Harper entered precisely at 10 a.m., scanning the room before approaching Daniel's table. He looked stressed, his usual polish was disheveled, with dark circles suggesting sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," Greg said, settling across from Daniel. "I hoped we could discuss resolving this situation before it gets out of hand." "It's already out of hand," Daniel replied calmly. "Your wife emotionally abused my daughter in public. There's no resolution that doesn't involve consequences." Greg leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, Linda acknowledges she may have been too harsh. She's prepared to make a public apology to Ava, maybe donate to a disability charity in her name. But this investigation you've started, it's going to destroy lives, Daniel. Good people who made a mistake. Good people don't tell disabled children to crawl," Daniel said flatly. "And this wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern of abuse going on for years." "You don't understand the full picture," Greg pressed. "Linda has dedicated her life to this community. Yes, she's demanding about standards, but that's why property values stay high, why families want to live here. You're going to tear that down over one moment of poor judgment. Daniel studied Greg's face, noting the careful phrasing and practiced deflection. This was a man accustomed to managing crises and minimizing legal exposure. Tell me about the Garcia family, Daniel said, watching Greg's reaction. Was harassing an autistic child also about property values? Greg's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you've been told, but Linda's concerns about that situation were legitimate. The child was disruptive, other residents complained. So she filed a false CPS report? Used my own department as a weapon against innocent parents. Daniel's voice stayed calm, but his eyes were steel. That's a felony, Greg. Your wife could face prison. Color drained from Greg's face. That's not how it happened. She had genuine concerns about the child's welfare. That's false and we both know it, Daniel said. I've read the report. She claimed parents were neglecting their son because they couldn't control autism-related behaviors. That's not concern, that's malicious system abuse. Greg sat back, his facade crumbling. What do you want, Daniel? Money? We could arrange compensation for Ava's distress, therapy costs, whatever you think is appropriate. I want justice, Daniel replied. I want your wife to face legal consequences. And I want every other Linda Harper in this county to understand that abusing vulnerable children will not be tolerated. You're making a mistake, Greg said, his tone shifting darker. Linda has friends throughout county government. Judges, prosecutors, city council members. Do you really think your little investigation will stand against that pressure? Daniel smiled coldly. Is that a threat, Greg? Because threatening a law enforcement officer during an investigation is also a crime. Should I add that to the growing list of charges your family is facing? Greg's face went pale as he realized his words were being recorded. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. This conversation is over. Yes, it is, Daniel agreed. Give Linda my regards. Tell her that running to powerful friends won't help this time. The evidence is too strong and the law is on our side. After Greg left, Jake crossed the street and joined Daniel, his expression grim but satisfied. Did you get all that? Daniel asked. Every word. Including his bribery attempt and political pressure threat. That recording goes straight into evidence. Jake shook his head in disgust. These people really don't understand they're not above the law. They're about to learn, Daniel said. How are we looking on formal charges? The prosecutor's office reviewed our preliminary evidence yesterday. They're recommending we proceed with charges for emotional abuse of a minor, filing false reports, and harassment. If we establish the pattern with other families, they'll consider civil rights violations. Daniel felt deep satisfaction. The system was working exactly as designed, methodically building consequences for Linda's years of abuse. Friday afternoon brought the moment Daniel had been working toward. Jake called with news he had been hoping to hear. The district attorney's office had formally filed charges against Linda Harper. Emotional abuse of a minor, filing false police reports, and harassment were serious offenses carrying potential jail time and significant fines. The arraignment is Monday morning, Jake informed him. Linda will be arrested this afternoon. I thought you'd want to know before it becomes public. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling relief and vindication. Thank you, Jake. For everything. Thank Maria, Jake replied. She backed us when other supervisors might have worried about political fallout. And Daniel? You did good work. Professional, thorough, by the book. Whatever happens next, you can be proud of how you handled this. That evening, Daniel sat Ava down for a conversation he had been both dreading and anticipating. She had been quieter than usual all week, her normal enthusiasm dimmed by Linda's cruel words. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something important, he began, settling beside her on the couch. Remember what Mrs. Harper said to you at the park? Ava nodded, her face clouding. She said I should crawl. That I wasn't normal. What she said was wrong, cruel, and illegal, Daniel said firmly. Adults who emotionally abuse children break the law, and they face punishment. Mrs. Harper was arrested today. Ava's eyes widened. Arrested? Like the bad guys on TV. Sometimes bad guys wear nice clothes and live in big houses, Daniel explained. But that doesn't make what they do less wrong. Mrs. Harper hurt you on purpose and the law says that's not allowed. Will she go to jail? Ava asked, and Daniel heard something unexpected in her voice, not fear or sadness, but cautious hope that justice might actually exist. Maybe, he said honestly. That's up to a judge to decide. But even if she doesn't go to jail, she'll face consequences. And most importantly, she'll never be in a position to hurt you or other children again. Ava was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then she asked the question that broke Daniel's heart. Daddy, am I really different from other kids? You are different, sweetheart, Daniel said carefully. You're braver than most kids I know. You're kinder, more determined, and you never give up when things are hard. Being different doesn't mean being less than anyone else. It means being special in your own unique way. But my legs don't work like other kids' legs. That's true. And that's okay. You happen to use a wheelchair, but that doesn't make you broken or wrong. It makes you Ava, my brilliant, beautiful, incredible daughter. Ava smiled then, the first genuine smile he had seen from her all week. Mrs. Harper was wrong about me. Yes, she was. And now everyone will know it. 3 months later, Daniel sat in courtroom 3B watching Linda Harper face consequences for her actions. The criminal trial had been brief but devastating, with witness after witness testifying about her pattern of harassment and abuse. Elena Garcia had flown back to testify about the false CPS report. Sarah Thompson had shown the video of Linda telling Ava to crawl. Mrs. Patel, an elderly resident who had been fined for leaving her walker visible, described years of intimidation designed to force her from her home. Linda's defense attorney tried portraying her as a dedicated volunteer overwhelmed by community leadership pressures, but the prosecutor systematically dismantled that narrative. This wasn't stress-related poor judgment, it was deliberate cruelty directed at vulnerable residents over multiple years. Judge Patricia Williams was known for fairness and particular concern for cases involving children. As she prepared to announce Linda's sentence, the courtroom was silent except for Ava's wheelchair wheels quietly shifting beside Daniel. Mrs. Harper, Judge Williams began, her voice carrying judicial authority, your actions represent a profound betrayal of trust placed in you by your community. You used your position to systematically harass vulnerable residents, filing false reports with Child Protective Services and emotionally abusing children who looked to adults for protection. Linda stood beside her attorney, pale but defiant. Even facing criminal conviction, she seemed unable to comprehend the gravity of her actions. The evidence reveals a pattern of discriminatory behavior violating both victims' civil rights and basic human decency principles. Your treatment of Ava Morrison, telling a disabled child to crawl to prove her worth, represents cruelty that scars children for life. Judge Williams paused, looking directly at Linda. However, the most disturbing aspect was your abuse of the Child Protective Services system. You filed false reports against innocent families, weaponizing a system designed to protect children. This represents fundamental violation of public trust. The judge's voice hardened. I sentence you to 18 months in county jail, suspended to 6 months with credit for time served, followed by 3 years supervised probation. You will complete 500 hours of community service working with organizations serving disabled children and families. You will pay restitution to all affected families, including therapy costs for children who suffered emotional trauma from your actions. Additionally, Judge Williams concluded, you are permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position and from filing any Child Protective Services reports unless you have direct knowledge of immediate physical danger to a child. Linda's composure finally cracked as the sentence's full weight hit her. 6 months in jail, 3 years probation, and a permanent record following her forever. More importantly, she would never again be positioned to abuse vulnerable children. As court adjourned, Daniel felt Ava's hand slip into his. Is it over, Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. It's over. 6 months later, Willow Creek had transformed into the inclusive community it had always claimed to be. Under Sarah Thompson's leadership, the HOA implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination policies, established grievance processes for unfairly targeted residents, and created a special fund helping families with accessibility improvements. The park where Ava had been humiliated now featured a memorial garden dedicated to children of all abilities, with accessible pathways and sensory-friendly equipment. The community had rallied around the project, with residents volunteering time and money to create spaces where every child could play safely and happily. Daniel stood at his kitchen window watching Ava practice basketball in their driveway. Her confidence had returned stronger than before, tempered by knowledge that the world could be cruel, but strengthened by understanding that good people would fight against that cruelty. Dad, come watch. Ava called out, positioning for a difficult shot. Coach Martinez says I'm ready for the regional tournament. Daniel stepped outside, marveling at his daughter's resilience. Linda's abuse had left scars. Ava still sometimes asked if she was normal, still worried about being different. But she had also learned that being different could be strength, that fighting for justice was worthwhile, and that love and determination could overcome even the cruelest obstacles. "Show me what you've got, superstar," Daniel said, settling on their porch steps. Ava lined up her shot with serious concentration. The ball arced through the air in perfect trajectory, swishing through the net without touching the rim. She pumped her fist triumphantly, her smile bright enough to light the entire neighborhood. "Perfect shot," Daniel called out, his heart swelling with pride. "Just like you taught me," Ava replied, maneuvering to retrieve the ball. "Aim for what you want, focus on your target, and never give up until you get there." As Daniel watched his daughter continue practicing, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Linda Harper's cruelty had threatened to break Ava's spirit, to plant seeds of self-doubt that could have grown into lifelong insecurities. Instead, it had become a catalyst for justice, a reminder that good people must stand up against bullies and that the system, when used properly, could protect the vulnerable. The legal victory was complete. Linda had served her jail time, paid her restitution, and was now working her community service hours at a local disability advocacy center under close supervision. Greg had lost several high-profile clients who didn't want to be associated with his family's scandal, and they had quietly moved away from Willow Creek to rebuild their lives elsewhere. But the real victory was simpler and more profound. Ava was happy, confident, and secure in knowing she was loved and valued exactly as she was. She knew that being different didn't make her less than anyone else, and that when faced with cruelty or injustice, there were people who would fight for her. That evening, as Daniel tucked Ava into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, I've been thinking about Mrs. Harper." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What about her, sweetheart?" "I hope her community service helps her understand why what she did was wrong. I hope she learns to be kinder to children who are different." The forgiveness in his daughter's voice amazed him. After everything Linda had put her through, Ava could still find compassion for her tormentor. It was a level of grace that humbled Daniel and reminded him why he had fought so hard to protect her innocence. "You're incredibly wise," he told her, kissing her forehead. "And incredibly kind. You taught me that fighting for what's right doesn't mean hating people who do wrong things," Ava said. "It means trying to make the world better for everyone." As Daniel turned off her light and closed her door, he felt deep completion. The war for Ava's dignity had been won not just in courtrooms and community meetings, but in preserving her fundamental goodness and optimism. Linda Harper had tried to break his daughter's spirit, but instead had helped forge it into something stronger and more beautiful than before. Outside, Willow Creek settled into peaceful evening quiet. Children's laughter echoed from the community park where accessible swings carried kids of all abilities toward the sky. The neighborhood was truly inclusive now, a place where every family could feel welcome and safe. And in their modest house on Maple Street, a father and daughter slept peacefully, secure in knowing that justice had been served and that love, determination, and fighting for what's right would always triumph over cruelty and hatred. The story of Ava Morrison and Linda Harper became a local legend, shared in other communities where HOAs wielded too much power and vulnerable residents needed advocates. Daniel continued his work protecting children throughout the county, but also became a speaker at conferences and training sessions, teaching other parents and professionals how to fight back against institutional bullying and discrimination. Most importantly, Ava grew up knowing she was valuable exactly as she was, that her differences made her special rather than less than others, and that when faced with injustice, good people would always fight for what's right. She carried that knowledge into adolescence and adulthood, becoming an advocate for disability rights and a voice for children who couldn't speak for themselves. Linda Harper's moment of cruelty had been intended to diminish and humiliate. Instead, it had sparked a movement that made Willow Creek a model community for inclusion and accessibility. Sometimes the most devastating attacks become catalysts for the most beautiful transformations. And sometimes when a father fights for his daughter's dignity with skill, determination, and unwavering love, justice doesn't just prevail, it creates a legacy that makes the world a little bit better for everyone. Years passed, and Daniel would often think back to that terrible Saturday morning at the park. What had started as a simple trip to try new swings had become a turning point that changed not just their lives, but their entire community. Ava finished high school as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to study law, inspired by watching her father use the legal system to protect vulnerable people. She specialized in disability rights advocacy, representing families who faced discrimination and abuse. During her college graduation speech, Ava spoke about the importance of standing up for others who couldn't defend themselves. She talked about learning that true strength came not from physical ability, but from moral courage and determination to do what's right. Someone once told me I should crawl to prove I deserved equal treatment, Ava told the crowd that day. Instead, I learned to stand up, not physically but morally, for myself and others who face discrimination. We all have the power to make the world more inclusive and just. Daniel sat in the audience, tears streaming down his face as he listened to his daughter's words. Linda Harper had tried to break Ava's spirit with one moment of cruelty. Instead, she had created a fierce advocate who would spend her life protecting others from similar abuse. The wheelchair-accessible swings at Willow Creek Community Park were eventually replaced with even better equipment as the community continued improving its facilities. A small plaque was installed near the playground that read, "A community that welcomes all children creates stronger families and a better future for everyone." Daniel never saw Linda Harper again after her sentencing. He heard through neighborhood gossip that she had completed her community service and moved to another state with Greg. Her work at the Disability Advocacy Center had reportedly been transformative, both for the family she served and for herself. The director had written to the judge saying Linda had become one of their most dedicated volunteers, genuinely committed to making amends for her past behavior. Daniel hoped that was true. He had never wanted to destroy Linda's life, only to stop her from destroying others. The goal had been justice, not revenge, and justice sometimes included the possibility of redemption. On quiet evenings, Daniel would sit on his porch and watch the neighborhood children play. Kids of all backgrounds and abilities ran through the streets, rode bikes on the sidewalks, and played games in each other's yards. The community had truly become what it had always claimed to be, a place where families could thrive regardless of their differences. Sometimes Sarah Thompson would join him on the porch, both of them watching their daughters, now young women, navigate the world with confidence and purpose. They would talk about how much the neighborhood had changed, how much better it had become. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't fought back?" Sarah asked one evening. Daniel considered the question carefully. "I think about Mrs. Patterson sometimes," he said finally. "The elderly woman who died from the stress of Linda's harassment. If we hadn't stopped Linda, how many more people would have suffered? How many more children would have been told they didn't belong?" "You saved more than just Ava," Sarah observed. "You saved the whole community." "We all saved it," Daniel corrected. "Everyone who testified, everyone who stood up when it mattered. That's how change really happens, when good people decide they won't tolerate cruelty anymore." As the sun set over Willow Creek Estates, Daniel reflected on the lessons he had learned. Evil didn't always come in dramatic forms. Sometimes it appeared as a well-dressed woman with a clipboard, using bureaucratic power to make vulnerable people's lives miserable. But good people, working together within legal and ethical frameworks, could defeat even systematic oppression. The most important lesson was one Ava had taught him through her own grace and resilience. Fighting for justice didn't require becoming hateful or vengeful. It required determination, courage, and an unwavering commitment to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. In the end, Linda Harper's attempt to humiliate a disabled child had backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking Ava's spirit, it had forged her into a powerful advocate for others. Instead of dividing the community, it had brought neighbors together in support of inclusion and equality. Sometimes the worst attacks create the strongest responses. Sometimes cruelty plants seeds that grow into movements for justice. And sometimes, when parents love their children enough to fight for their dignity, the world becomes a little bit better for everyone. The war that had started with a wheelchair on grass had ended with a community transformed. And in that transformation, Daniel found the true meaning of victory, not just defeating those who would do harm, but creating a world where such harm became impossible. As Daniel finally headed inside that evening, he passed Ava's old basketball hoop in the driveway. The net was worn from years of perfect shots, a testament to his daughter's persistence and skill. Tomorrow she would be flying back to law school for her final semester, preparing to take her advocacy work to an even larger stage. The little girl who had been told to crawl was now standing tall as a voice for justice. And the father who had fought to protect her dignity had learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply creating a better world. That night, Daniel fell asleep knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, he had raised a daughter who would always fight for what's right. Linda Harper's cruelty had failed completely. Instead of creating a broken victim, it had forged a champion for others who faced discrimination and abuse. In Willow Creek, in courtrooms across the country, and in communities where vulnerable people needed advocates, Ava Morrison's story would continue inspiring others to stand up for justice. The wheelchair-bound girl who had been told she didn't belong had proven that she belonged everywhere, and that dignity, once defended, could never truly be taken away. The victory was complete, the legacy secured, and the future bright with possibility. Evil had been defeated not through violence or hatred, but through love, determination, and an unshakable belief that all children deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. In the end, that was the greatest revenge of all.